Hello everyone, my name is Adam Trong, and today I will be presenting my symbolic collage for Ellie Weasel's nonfiction novel Night. My presentation will be divided into three parts: the collage itself exhibiting pictures and symbols and how they relate to Eliza and Albert, the similarities and differences between their two stories, and finally a deep dive on the moral of Night. This is the photo collage that I made, and within it not only can you see the 10 pictures, 5 each relating to my two characters, but I also included icons of other significant symbols. Now, transitioning to the next slide, we can get a better look at my chosen coming-of-age Holocaust victim, Albert Friedlander. Albert had always been a religious person ever since he was a child, and he was raised in a religious household. I chose a picture of the synagogue he attended even before the Holocaust, as it holds significance because ultimately this is the place where Albert decided he would become a rabbi. Next, I included a picture of a bruise, as it was said in Albert's story that he was often brutally bullied by his peers for being Jewish. This shows great significance to Albert's development as a child because it would teach him the severity of the anti-Semitic world that he lived in at the time. As Albert's family was boarding the ship taking him to Cuba away from the dangers of being a Jew in Berlin, his stamp collection was confiscated due to his religious identity, and is why I chose it as one of his symbols. Its significance lies within why the book was taken from him, as it showed him the level of disgust Jews faced at the time, considering that they were literally leaving the country and the officials still confiscated his collection as a final spit in the face. Albert's next symbol is a ship, more specifically the ship that Albert's family fled on that brought them to paradise in Cuba, which is significant for had this opportunity not been available to them, they could have possibly died in a concentration camp, and Albert would have never been able to educate the many people he has as an adult. Lastly, for Albert, we have the plane that took them to the United States. This holds great significance since in America, Albert would graduate high school, study to become a rabbi, and become one in 1951, with all of this not being possible had he not boarded that plane. Compared to Albert's, Eliza's symbols can be viewed from a much more grim perspective. Eliza Weasel, author of the award-winning novel Night, had faced many hardships to make it through the Holocaust, and these images can help you understand them. When he first entered the camp, Ellie was first greeted from the sight of dead corpses piled into large mounds of decaying bodies waiting to be thrown into a fire for cremation. I chose this as his first symbol as I believe this shock of a sight was where Eliza truly began to realize the grave situation he was in. Next, I included a picture of the night sky symbolizing death and despair. This is especially significant for Eliza as most of the horrible experiences he went through happened during the night, some of which include the march through the snow, when he eats soup that tastes of corpses, and of course, his father's death. Multiple times throughout night, Eliza, along with other prisoners, contemplate death and see the barbed wire as an expedited way to die. I chose it as one of Ellie's symbols because of its significance as an object that encaged him inside the concentration camp and taunted him every day, but at the same time challenged his mentality to either stay strong or leave his father alone. Towards the end of chapter 3, we see Eliza receive his tattoo of identification, which is my fourth symbol for him. It holds considerable significance in Ellie's life as it would take from him the last thing he had left, his name, as he was now just a letter and set of numbers to the eyes of everyone around him. The last symbol I chose for Eliza was represented in this collage with scraps of bread. Bread played a large role in the development of Eliza in the concentration camps, as it was essentially the only thing that him and the other prisoners could depend on for survival. He saw this firsthand when he watched bread being tossed up onto the train and watched his fellow inmates tear each other apart for scraps, teaching him the cruel reality of his situation, as the bread was thrown onto the train cars by German spectators knowing that they would do this. Moving on to the key similarities and differences between Albert and Eliza, we can see that they walked down contrasting paths during the Holocaust, but actually had come from similar roots. As a child before and even during the start of the Holocaust, both Eliza and Albert were very naive, as children should be. They did not grasp the severity of the grave imminent danger they were in and had just thought that they were disliked for being Jewish. This leads me to my second similarity, as they were both physically harassed for being Jewish. Eliza, of course, was beaten at the concentration camp, and Albert as a child by his classmates. Both also experienced segregation firsthand, with Eliza being forced into Jewish ghettos and Albert not being allowed into some, if not most, of the stores and buildings in his area. Looking past all the negative similarities in their stories, we can now see the positive in that, as adults, they both dedicated their lives to helping others. Eliza would help in the spread of awareness, as he believed that no one should ever have to face the things he did, while Albert turned to religion, and as a rabbi, he would help educate children from his homeland Germany on his heritage. In terms of their differences, the two shared many as well, considering the ways they experienced the Holocaust. First and most evident was that Ellie was forced into a concentration camp, and Albert had fled to Cuba. This difference would play a sizable part in the two's perspectives on life, as in the camps, Ellie would no longer believe in God, leading to me to their second difference being religion. In Auschwitz, the things Ellie saw were so terrifying that he simply could not believe a God existed on this earth and would allow that to happen. Albert, on the other hand, never witnessed those horrors and stayed true to his faith, even becoming a rabbi or Jewish religious scholar. Eliezer also lost all his family members in the Holocaust, with his sisters and mother stripped away from him at the start, and his father gone towards the end of the Holocaust. Ellie was left all alone. Albert was fortunate enough to escape the country with his family intact. However, he would lose a good friend as he watched him get denied access into Cuba and sent back to Germany, where he would never see him again. In closing, we are brought to their final difference, being that Eliezer faced a multitude of brutal physical hardships while Albert was kept safe from them. In Auschwitz, Eliezer tells a story of how he was on the brink of starvation, marched through snow on the verge of exhaustion, and was worked ultimately to the bone. Albert, however, did not go through such experiences, as he would escape to Cuba and live an adventurous life safe from bodily harm. Reading these two survivor stories and learning the truth of the Holocaust that I was previously uneducated upon, I can bring to a reasonable conclusion the morals of their tragic accounts. The moral of Knight, I believe, is to never give up. Eliezer went through the most brutal of hells during the Holocaust, and he survived solely because he did not give up. He did not have superior intellect or outstanding physical capabilities, and even if he had, they would not have mattered, for everyone was starved to flesh and bones, and most prisoners' mental capacities were tortured day in, day out. Where Eliezer's strength lied was in his connection with his father, as his only motivation left, along with his mental fortitude to not surrender. His father, during the march through the snow, actually told Eliezer a very powerful message that would stick with him and even help him stay strong after his death, in which he said, "Don't let yourself be overcome by sleep, Eliezer. It's dangerous to fall asleep in the snow. One falls asleep forever." For a bit of backstory, Eliezer and his father were trudging through the snow for hours through the night, watching their fellow inmates drop like flies. Eliezer, after reaching a resting point on their march, wanted to stay at rest for just a few minutes longer, but he knew that he'd be behind, and in the state he was, broke past the mental barrier holding him back, and marched forward. Just after his father's death, Ellie decides to stare in a mirror, and it is actually the first time he has seen himself since the Jewish ghettos. He gazes into it and says, "From the depths of the mirror, a corpse was contemplating me." With his father, his last straw of motivation to stay alive gone, and the man looking back at him in the mirror even telling him to give up, we are led to believe that no one could possibly live on after that. But he did. He survived the Jewish Holocaust. He survived the tortures of man that even he believed God would not allow, and told the tale educating people on his story, because he never gave up. The moral of Albert's story differs a bit from Elijah's in that it's not as obvious. Digging a bit deeper, I found the most apparent moral to be to make an impact with your life. Albert had all the reasons to not become a successful person. For starters, he was a Jewish child living in the capital of Germany, where he would face many hardships just because of his religious identity. Fortunately for Albert, his family was fairly comfortable and had the funds to flee the country and start a new life in Cuba. However, he was backed up from the difficulties of arriving in a new, foreign country, as he had to search for housing, learn a new language, and make new friends. Nonetheless, he became a part of the growing Jewish community in Havana, Cuba, and would move to the U.S. to seek greater opportunities. Jews were not tormented very much at all in America. However, he would come to realize that the same thing that was happening to the Jews in Berlin were happening to the African Americans in Mississippi. Following this newly gained insight, Albert became a strong supporter of the African American civil rights movement, as well as the Reform movement. This just goes to show how anyone, despite their backgrounds and hardships they had to face from a youth, can support others and make an impact with their life. Albert would also go and make frequent trips to Germany, where even though it was hard to reconcile with the painful memories he had in his home country, he'd teach children there that were interested in their heritage. Albert went beyond the necessary, and in Germany, he would lead religious services, attend cultural events, and lecture. He worked to teach both Jews and Germans about the Holocaust. This concludes my presentation. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for your time.